Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we're making a little bit of a shift or an audible for Hanukkah. We're going to be looking at Sichos Haran Os Mem. Now, Sichos Haran operates within the universe of Rebbe Nachman's teachings, but by no means does it bear the import of a written text like Likutei Moharan does. It's certainly of profound value, unique value, offers a certain insight that even Likutei Moharan doesn't offer in a revealed way, along with all of the other writings of Chaim Maharan, Sipurei Maisios, and everything. Nevertheless, Likutei Moharan is the written text itself, is the written text, and Sichos Haran is more of an additional framework into the world of Rabbeinu, which comes about by way of recorded teachings or by way of the memory of these teachings through Rabbi Nassan in particular. Not that everything else is also not, everything else is also from Rabbi Nassan, but in Sichos Haran, it's more apparently influenced by the interpretation of the person who's experiencing it or witnessing it, rather than Likutei Moharan, which is a giloi. Each and every one is a giloi. Nevertheless, there are certain teachings in Sichos Haran that all of the teachings in Sichos Haran carry a particular punch, but there's certain ones that operate like a mimer, and they operate almost like a teaching that you would find in Likutei Moharan, and that's what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to look at Torah Mem, or Sicha Mem, in Sichos Haran, and we'll see where it brings us in terms of our understanding of Hanukkah, and really, most significantly, to prepare us, to help us open ourselves up, to open up our doors, to illuminate the outside, to allow ourselves to be placed in Rishus Harabim, and that's what a teaching like this kind of helps us orient ourselves towards. So Zakt the Heilige Rebbe, Be'inyan Sifrei HaMechakrim, when it comes to philosophical works, when it comes to works that are based on intellectual knowledge or insight, which is based on the rules of logic to determine the clarification of information to the degree that it begins to feel like a fact. Mechkar, science, the philosophy of the mind. Mevur kvar tzlinu kama pa'amim she'asur la'asek bahem v'tzarech laharchik ma'oid lebli lilmoid oisam ulebli lahabit bahem klal. We've already explained numerous times that it's forbidden for a person to spend much time engaged in these teachings, and a person must distance themselves to a large degree from studying them so that they really shouldn't be looking at them whatsoever. Now, obviously, when it comes to Rabbeinu's Eitzah, or the particular framework in which to handle these texts, so what we see is what we get, and there's clearly a strong pushback against these texts. And as Rabbi Nassan explains in Sichos Haran elsewhere, that ultimately Kabbalah stands upon the shoulders of philosophy, so that it's not just that it's dangerous, it's also not significant anymore because Panemius HaTorah is revealing something new. Nevertheless, especially as it becomes clear in the Likutei Moharan, Rabbeinu was working with a full and complete understanding of the philosophical texts. He was working with a full and complete command of Mor Nevuchim. Irregardless of what Rabbeinu's opinion as to how we should look at Mor Nevuchim, Rabbeinu was not coming to say anything negative about the Rambam, but rather about the danger of reading texts like that out of context. But we see included within the teachings of Likutei Moharan, in particular Torah Samach Daled, that there is instruction given to one who engages with these texts, and there's eitzah given to one who finds themselves lost as a result of these texts, meaning to say that at the very least, Rabbeinu was telling us to stay very far away from these texts, but there was also the awareness that there might be a need to help somebody who has fallen into these texts. Not to claim that there's a hidden message here to go out and learn the texts. Rabbeinu was taking a lot from Sefer HaBris. Sefer HaBris has all of the philosophical matter imaginable that a person would need. There's really no need to read these books. But Rabbeinu ultimately has an openness to the fact that, in spite of the fact that we shouldn't access these things, nevertheless, it's common and likely for a person to be influenced by the way of thinking that does come out of these books. Afilu b'sifrei chakiros of Gedolei Yisrael. We should even stay away from the svarim of chakiros of Gedolei Yisrael. Ki iser gadol ma'od l'lmodosam. It's a tremendous iser. It's forbidden to learn them. Kvar mevur b'kama svarim gadol ha'isser l'lmod mehem. This is not the path of Yaakov. Yaakov's path is not the path of Chakira, not the path of searching for absolute truth, and only once I clarify absolute truth can I stand upon it. That's not the way that we study. Our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his relationship with the world is not based on chakira. It's not based on the development of intellectual postulates that are built upon the laws of logic that bring me to this supreme alliance with the crown of man, which is my mind, God forbid, but rather it's emunah. It's an emunah that believes beyond any need for a chakira, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created the world, and he sustains the world, and that in the future HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to renew his world. It's like the story of the Chacham and the Tam. As Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman says, the Tam is lamala from the Chacham. The Tam is a darga of Keser. The Chacham is a darga of Chachma. The Tamimus of the Tam is not a Tamimus that ignores the reality of wisdom, but rather it's like the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh teaches us that every ounce of wisdom becomes a receptacle and a vessel through which I can encounter the secret that I have no grasp. That halavai oisi azvu v'tarasi shamru, as the Baal Shem Tov says, that you should keep my Torah and leave me, and that's okay. Halavai, you should keep my Torah and leave me. Zak Tehillah Baal Shem Tov. Either way, a person is going to be leaving HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the end of the day. I think we went over this teaching, because at the end of the day, Leis Machshavat Tvis Ve'Klau. Nobody's going to know anything in the end. Tachlis hayediyah shelo nida. If that's the case, then why learn anything at all? Let me just live in the non-knowing. So Zak Tehillah Baal Shem Tov that no, Halavai Tairasi Shamru Oisi Azv Tarasi Shamru. The fact that we know nothing doesn't free us from the responsibility of trying to know everything over and over and coming to the conclusion over and over that I don't know anything. Because within that very experience rests the secret of the sha'ashua, of the pleasantness, of the back and forth Ratzav V'Shov process of thinking that I can know and then coming to a place of surrendering my attempt at knowledge and then regaining the strength to come to know again, and then again surrendering the sense of knowledge, like Rebbe Nachman describes in Torah Beis and Tanyana. And so the not knowing has to be built upon a process of trying to know, and then through the process of trying to know, I come to the place of realizing that I can't know. Rather than just accepting full ignorance at the beginning, I try and develop wisdom, and then I come to a place of learned ignorance, where I come to the apex of wisdom, which is to not know. But then every step of knowledge that I just took to get there is transformed into a vessel that also reveals the unknowability of all things. And so it's like the Rebbe quotes very often in the name of the Choyze that they used to make fun of the Hasidim and say, Hasidim learn in Nisht, that Hasidim don't learn. Hasidim aren't learning anything. And ultimately, like anything else, that was transformed into a bracha. It's not that they're not learning anything, but what they're learning over and over is that you can't know anything. Hasidim learning Nisht. The person is learning Nisht, that lo yodea klum. That's the Maila over Sefer HaChakira. And ultimately, this is the conflict between Yahadus and Yavan. Yavan, as the philosophical crown of Athens, which is the desire to know everything, believes in the perfectibility of wisdom, which means that the human being can have a full grasp on something. Yiddishkeit, on the other hand, does not believe in the fullness of wisdom. Adrabah, Ipcha Mastaber, Tamimis is higher than the Chacham. Obviously, we have to try and be a Chacham, but it's specifically for the purpose of becoming a Tam. And then Klal Yisrael has the ability of revealing the deepest wisdom, which is that there's only the ability to jump beyond the Chakira. V'derech elu asfarim lahakshos kushios shenirim kekushios gedolos v'teretz chalush ma'od u'misha rotza lachkor yoter lahakshos al teretz yochel lahakshos v'lo yoilo hateretz al kein asur l'ayim behem klal. So Rabbeinu is giving a very clear reason as to the isser inherent in terms of getting stuck in philosophical texts that utilize this kind of Socratic reasoning and ask massive questions with flimsy postulates that answer those questions. That if I'm exposed to big questions, which are really big questions, they're kushios, but like Rabbeinu says in Torah Samach Daled, they're not really kushios because there's no answer to them. Meaning the reason we don't ask about what happened before creation or why did the infinite make it this way is because once we start asking questions like that, there's no limit to the questions. A person must accept certain limitations of thinking so that the mind can attach itself to think. But the philosophical attempt to assault the borders of my knowledge, to lay claim to absolute certainty by breaking free from the horizon of my mind by way of knowledge, is a failed attempt at creating some element of an avodah zarah of the self, of this quest for perfection. And so Rabbeinu is explaining, by getting caught up in the questions and then hearing these flimsy answers, all a person is going to remember is the flimsiness of the answer, as well as the tendency to ask more and more questions, and it's ultimately going to lead a person to the same place. Nobody has any answers, but now the person is going to think that they don't have answers because they're not smart enough, and that's going to lead to a brokenness. And And here Rabbeinu is paraphrasing Samach Daled, that in truth, the kfir of the Chalal HaPanui, which has no answer, not because there's such Gavaldic questions, but because we can't operate as human beings in accordance with the frequency that would try and claim to have answers to those questions. To try and give an answer to a question that breaks the frame of human consciousness in terms of that which took place before is obviously not the functional mindset that we have of wisdom. And to ask questions like that just disregards the rules and regulations of what it means to be a thinking human being. And therefore, Rabbeinu says most of the questions that they're asking are not really questions, they appear to be questions. Umasha anuroim sheish b'nei adam shehem daisem nimshachas achari svarim hakadoshim v'norayim ma'od kivon sifrei hazoyer v'sifrei ha'arizal zecher tzadik l'bracha k'yoytze. And the fact that we have differentiations of spirits that have a tendency to be drawn to different books. Some are drawn to the writings of Pnimius HaTorah, to the Arizal, to the Zohar HaKadosh, to the Svarim of the Yechidei Hadoros. Afal pi sheish bahem chidushim nara'im ma'oid u'ma'irim einayim u'musupim dvash, v'hem nimshachim daika achar inyanim acherim kiblen chakiros. We see that there are some people who are drawn after Pnimius HaTorah, and then we also see some people who, in spite of the beauty of Pnimius HaTorah, are not drawn after Pnimius HaTorah. And so what's the reason? If every person should be drawing their sustenance from Emunah, from Chachmas HaEmunah, as opposed to Chachmas HaChakira, Pnimius HaTorah teaches us that ultimately we don't know. Chakira is rooted in the perception that we ultimately do know. So if ultimately the Tainug is in the not knowing, and that's the Kli for Emunah, so then why is it that there's some Yidden who are continuing to be stuck in the desire to know something? And why haven't they tasted the light of not knowing? Da ki zehu machmas mazgam ki mazgam betivam umezagram and told shenoda b'mezagra she'enim yichilim lispol as a davar kadosh be'emes. This is something that comes from beyond the human being, meaning to say the Rabbeinu is saying it's so fundamentally clear that a Jew's neshama should be nimshach achar pnimius haTorah, to the degree that if a Jew's neshama is not naturally nimshach achar pnimius haTorah, then it's the result of some element that has an impact on their neshama that has nothing to do with them. It's part of their unconscious processing. It's something that comes from the parents. It's something that comes from those areas of self that can't be examined. And a question like this means that the natural lot of each and every individual is pnimius haTorah. That's the secret of the Pach Shemen. The Pach Shemen is the secret that each and every Yid be'emes la'amiso has a shaychus to Pnimius HaTorah. And any deviation away from that desire and getting stuck in the path of Chakira is ultimately reflective of something that the person can't necessarily be held accountable for. It's something that took place before the person emerged. But nevertheless, as Rabbeinu always says when it comes to things that feel like there's no bechira, in spite of the fact that it's almost like the person has no bechira, nevertheless, the person certainly has bechira. How? It doesn't matter how. It's a certainty. Person certainly has bechira. As Rebbe Nachman came to Rebbe Nachman, and it's printed in the back of Likutei Maharan, I think Chelek Beis, that be'inyan habechira, Ketzi Dami Inyan habechira, a person came to Rabbeinu and said, tell me the truth. Is there Bechira or is there not Bechira? And Rabbeinu's answer was, as it's recorded, is Bepashtus yesh Bechira biyad ha'adam. Bepashtus yesh Bechira biyad ha'adam. That's not necessarily the Amkus, but the Pashtus, what we live in accordance to, is that we have Bechira, and a person can always break free from this tendency of going down the path of Chakira and complication and the desire for certainty that leads them astray and reattach themselves to the path of Pnimius HaTorah. The only difference between a Yid who has a natural desire to chase after Pnimius HaTorah and a Yid who for some reason has an unconscious blockage that blocks them from Pnimius HaTorah is that the Yid who has the blockage has to push themselves through the crucible of not feeling illumination when learning Pnimius HaTorah till the point that they come to the other side where what they felt was cold and boring and like Niglos HaTorah suddenly becomes a palace of light. This is something we discussed in Ravitchemeyer Shirim on Rava Bar Chana last week, that very often at first glance Pnimius HaTorah appears to be like dry land. It appears to be devoid of significance. It appears to be particulars upon particulars and mathematical expressions and letter permutations to the degree that someone who's become suffocated of a life without Pnimius, and then they're told that there's a secret answer, and then they go to that secret answer and they read it for the first time, they become even more despondent because you're telling me this is the answer? This is more detail-oriented than anything else that bothered me. And the Rebbe points out that this is the nature of how it goes. A person has to be sovel. What's the savlanus? A person has to read the words with the belief that these words are going to create vessels within me that open me up. And eventually there's going to be an opening. And when that opening takes place, every part of my study, in spite of the fact that it felt like nothing, is going to be transformed into a new framework in which I can look at my experience. But every person can bend themselves and push themselves to become someone who's worthy of desiring Pnimiyas HaTorah. They just have to break their nature. Again, the way I understand this to mean is also that Pnimiyas HaTorah is a natural thing that a person needs when they recognize their deficiency. But when a person doesn't recognize their deficiency, so then the notion of there being something deeper than what the surface level conveys is silly, because the surface level is working great for me. Sod panemius, the fact that there's something more hidden underneath the surface, is only a necessity for someone who has either seen a crack in the surface or has realized that there's got to be something deeper here. And the prerequisite to becoming chli ra'ui, for a heart-to-heart, panim el panim relationship with Panimias HaTorah, is that inherent recognition that lo yodea klum, I don't know anything, and all I have is emuna. But if a person is operating in the mindset of chakira, which by definition orients oneself to a position of grasp and knowledge, so then a person is not necessarily engaged with the recognition of their deficiency, and then a person like that is not going to have the natural natia to Panimias HaTorah. Uba emes. V'nimtza. Within their svarim, says the Rebbe, within their svarim, nimsa b'sefreim kushios al seder habriya. After Rabbeinu, now we have to pay attention to what's happening here. After Rabbeinu just went through this whole setup and said the questions in these books are silly, and the questions in these books are meaningless, and in truth, they're not even questions, and they're meaningless questions, and a person has to traverse them. Now Rabbeinu's opening up with one of their questions and a response to their question, which again just highlights that, again, it's not a dual relationship. It's clear what's written here, that a person should not be spending their time learning these svarim. But nevertheless, if these svarim are in existence, that means that there's going to come a time where a person is reading them. It's like the famous story, Lahavdil, that a student of Rav Hutner's was quoting him something from a certain rabbi or a certain teacher who wasn't accepted within kind of the realm of the orthodox perspective of thinking. And Rav Hutner famously got upset. He says, that's so-and-so, and you shouldn't be reading it. So what's important about the story, and it's very clear about Rav Hutner and the way that he led the yeshiva as well, is that you're not allowed to read that, but I know it bal peh enough to know that you're reading it and that you shouldn't be reading it. Or like to a student who was working on a dissertation and was quoting Hegel, and he said, it's better to read it in the original German. Meaning, there's always an element, and again, I'm not using the politics of secrecy as described by the Pachad Yitzchak and his Chabura as to be aligned with Rabbeinu, although obviously influenced, but nevertheless, Rabbeinu here is saying, don't look at it, there's no need to look at it, but nevertheless, the fact that they're in reality means that we have to grapple with the things that are written in the book. The same way that we learned last week, that a book being written is a spiritual experience rather than just a text that is available to the person reading it, so too the fact that Sifrei Chitzonium are in the Welt means that we're exposed to that reality. And Rabbeinu has a whole Torah of it, how when we want to be mevatel, the koach of the nations of the world, we have to write. Because by writing, we're mataher the avir, so that their writing is no longer going to be there. But nevertheless, we have to look at their question. Nimsa b'sefreim kushios al seder habriya. What we find in their books are questions, difficulties, antinomies, contradictions with regards to the order of creation, the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. Ma zacha hakolchav lios kolchav. Why did a star merit to be a star? O hamazel lios mazel, or the constellation to be a constellation. Uma chetu hadavarim hashvelim shio shvelim. And what sin did the lower elements of existence engage in so that they would remain the lower elements of existence? Kagon behemos v'chayos ukiyot, so like animals and creatures. Madua lo haya behepech. Why shouldn't the animals be human beings and the human beings be animals? V'chein mipnei ma harosh rosh v'harege rego. Why is the head and the leg the leg? Umadua lo yeh behepech ukiyot sebazeh. Why is anything anything? Why shouldn't it be the opposite way around? Ukemivur be'elu akushios ba'arichos b'sifreim. As we see the extension and the extended treatment of these questions in their books. Uba emes, hakol, hevel, v'ra'os ruach. In truth, all of it is meaningless, meaning to say that these questions do not even register as actual questions, because the thing that they're questioning is ultimately the very truth that they're trying to convey. And in truth, a person need not chase after the secret of chakiros to come to a place of radical affirmation on an intellectual level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a tzaddik and a yashar, and tzaddik be'emunaso yichya. So these questions that Rabbeinu is eliciting are ultimately the questions that the Arizal is also asking. This questions of Seder Habriya, and what Rabbeinu is doing here is not saying that these are stupid questions necessarily, but to approach them from a perspective of Chakira is a silly path, and one that will lead to absolute nility because the attempt to know will never be successful. But the very same questions that are being asked here can also be shown explicitly in the Sha'arim of Eitz Chaim. Why is the head and the leg? If everything is unified, how is there difference? Why should this be that? Why is Malchus this and Keser that? But the secret that Rabbeinu is giving over here is that the issue is not necessarily the questions. The issue is the posture towards the question. The posture towards the question, which says that my mind can grasp this, and therefore the question just becomes a hechi timsi to a maskana, and the question is meant to be gotten rid of. So in that path, the question is meaningless. But from the perspective of Yiddishkeit, where the question itself is the energy of thought, where the klishya and the tiyuftas and all of those processes, as Rabbeinu says, that kasha is Rosh Tevo Shema Hashem Koli Ekra, that I'm calling out to you in each and every question. So then it's not so much what the question is, but rather how do I approach the question? How do I relate to the question? Where am I starting from? Where does the questioning attitude start from? Does it start from the absolute demand for life to operate in accordance with my wisdom and my knowledge? And anything that doesn't fit within my wisdom and my knowledge is considered something that's, impossible or supernatural? Or is it the recognition that I have no knowledge, and whatever is taking shape is the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I have to bend my mind to that reality? This is exactly the breakdown between Athens and Jerusalem, and the fact that for Yavan, as the Maharal clarifies, that Teva, or that a nace is just Teva. Anything that appears to be extraordinary can be explained by the laws of the ordinary. But what Hanukkah is revealing is the opposite, that even Teva is a nace, that even the natural order is miraculous. Yavan is saying we know everything, we can domesticate everything, even that which appears to be unknowable. Yiddishkeit is saying we don't know anything, even that which appears to be knowable. That's why when we sit by the candles, specifically in the darkness of night, which is the opposite of the sunlight and the illumination of Greek wisdom and insight, and we listen carefully to the dancing of the candles, and we sit there and we say, Yoshev b'seiser elyon. We say, God, you sit, you rest above in the elevated secret place of paradox and astira. The one thing that Greek wisdom and philosophical excellence cannot tolerate is the law of non-contradiction. If A equals B, and B is opposite to C, then A can't equal C. That's the law of non-contradiction. But in Yiddishkeit, they say, no, forget about law of non-contradiction. That's the secret of Keser, that two postulates can operate at once. Two opposing things can opposite at once. Ube'emes da, and we have to know, ki kol ha'olam kulo hu b'chinas galgel. With this Indian of Yoshev b'seiser elyon, the Svarim say it's Yoshev b'seiser al Yavan, that the tolerance of the stira and making room for contradictions and paradox at the heart of thought, which is seeing the natural order of things to in truth be as miraculous as the unnatural, because nature is as dizzying and as confusing and as unknowable as anything else, especially what we see nowadays from a quantum level. And so, be'emes da ki kol ha'olam kulo hu b'chinas galgel ha'chozer. The entire world is like a rotating sphere. It's a rotating sphere that's perpetually turning. It's a planet that's floating in space. Shakorim Dreidel. And ultimately, it's something that's spinning in space. And it goes from one side to the next. And if this point is over here in the next moment, it's going to rotate and be over there in the next moment. But after that full rotation, it's going to return exactly back to the place that it was. And then it's going to depart again from its point of origin and then rotate back. And it's a perpetual movement and stoppage and movement and stoppage that's spinning. It's a dreidel. The world is a spinning dreidel. And everything is returning over upon itself and transforming itself. That the beginning becomes the end, and the end becomes the beginning, and the cause becomes the effect, and the effect becomes the cause, and the top of a level becomes the lowest level of a higher level. Me adam lemalach u'memalach adam. A person shifts at each and every moment. There's gilgulim in a person's life each and every day. A person identifies and operates from a different lens at each moment in their lives. They take a different vantage point. Merosh regel, meregel rosh. It's all shifting. There's a buzzing shift at every moment. V'chein shar kol hadvarim sheba'olam kulam chayzrim chalila u'misgalgelin u'mishapchim zeh lezeh u'mizeh lezeh me'elyon letachton u'metachlon le'elyon. And in truth, there's no stability whatsoever to anything, and each and everything is simply that thing in that moment, and everything is transitioning at each and every moment. All of the things are perpetually shifting over and repeating and transforming themselves from one shape to another shape, and going from the top to the bottom, from this to that, and that to this, from above to below, and below to above. Ki be'emes b'shoresh hakol echad. Because in truth, everything comes from a singular place. Now, what Rabbeinu is doing here is giving us the heart of the Rashash's system. There's something called his klalos and his kashrus. Why is a partzuf a partzuf? If we talk about 5 partzufim, keser, chachma, bina, zer anpin, and malchus, why is chachma, chachma, and bina, bina, and why is zer anpin, and malchus, malchus? Why should there be a difference when things are emergent from an undifferentiated source? And so any answer that is going to give a reason for there being actual division and difference will also simultaneously need to ensure that it is at the very same point ensuring that we do not ever come to claim that there's any element of actual difference. And so we're stuck very much wedged between 2 impossible points. There's a reality of differentiation and things are separate and particularized, yet at the same point we are fundamentally operating within the belief system that the unified force behind everything is still ever present at every moment. So the secret that the Rashash comes onto, based on the writings of the Arizal, is the secret called his klalus and his kashrus. Now, let's give a very simple example to this in terms of a friendship and a relationship. Let's say I am speaking to another person, so I am person A, and other person is person B. Now, on an external level, I am A, and that person is B, and I am not B, and that person is not A. But when we look at things from the perspective of unity, which means that all things are composed of the very same stuff, they're just expressing themselves differently, then within A, which is me, I also contain a principle of B, and within B, who's the other person, they also contain a principle of A. And when I'm engaged in communication or connectivity, which is the secret of a yichud between 2 separate things, is there a merger between A and B, which would theoretically be an impossibility according to the laws of how Hashem created the world? Or is there more of a sublime form of yichud taking shape, which is referred to as his klalus and his kashrus, inter-inclusion and interpenetration, meaning to say that when I'm engaged with another person, I take the chelek of B that exists within me, and I share it with person B, and they take the chelek of A within them, and they share it with me. So I am giving over back to that person the part of that person that exists within me, and that other person is giving over to me the part of me that exists within the other person. Now, this is true, obviously, only by Kedusha, because Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh, and anyone who saves one soul of Nishmas Yisrael is as if they've saved every soul of Nishmas Yisrael, and each letter in the Torah is as if it's the entirety of the Torah. And when we say mitzvah sitzis v'taryag mitzvah sakaluyimba, that every mitzvah has all 613 particulars of mitzvahs in them, what are we talking about? But what we're revealing is that on the base level, everything has the potential to be anything that it would like to be. The miracle of individuation, where one thing becomes what it is and not some other thing, is that I collect all of the halakim of Joey Rosenfeld from within every other neshama of Klal Yisrael, and all of those halakim of Joey Rosenfeld from within every other neshama create Joey Rosenfeld. And each and every individual is just the sum total of the soul sparks that exist throughout the scattered body of Nishmas Yisrael across the body of Adam Arishon, and that is what our personalities are. And so what Rabbeinu is hinting to here is that each thing does in truth have the capacity to become some other thing, not necessarily on a revealed level, but on a quantum level, because ultimately everything is reflective of the same exact thing, the singular unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You guys with me on this? And so that's the spinning nature of the Dreidel. Everything is everything, and everything is rotating back onto itself and folding onto itself, because in truth, difference is the Chiddush. The true revelation of all things is unity. And if the Chiddush and the revelation is the differentiation, then garments can always be shifted. And so Rabbeinu says that in truth, everything is everything, and everything can flip into something else, which is real chaotic, because in truth, everything is singular, everything is one. Kiyesh nivdalim, dahainu malachim sheim nivdalim legamri min hachomer. There are levels of things that are abstracted and transcendent to physical reality, which we'll refer to as malachim, and they're separate from reality. And there are galgalim, which are a bechina of a choimer, of al chamram zach ma'od. And then you have the celestial forces, which are still refined and transcendent, but nevertheless, they have some relatability to physical reality because they have an impact on physical reality, as we understand from the nature of the stars and the impact that they have on reality. V'yesh olam hashafel, dahainu zeh ha'olam hashafel, shehu choimer gamor. So Rebbe Nachman over here is talking about the three worlds. He's talking about the worlds of separation. Because everything that Rabbeinu is saying over here doesn't apply to the world of Atzilus. The world of Atzilus, everything is what it is, and it's not some other thing. There's a fundamental revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. The Galgel HaChoizer that we encounter, and the chaotic shifts and things being different, and one person being different in the next moment, and not knowing which way to turn, and not knowing how I'm going to experience this same thing that I did yesterday, but I know it might be different. The Galgel HaChozer operates in accordance with the worlds of separation, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows for the process to take shape in a revealed way so that it could eventually be worked through in order to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So those three worlds can be compared to the world of the Malachim, the world of the Galgalim, and the Olam HaShafel. The world of Bria is the world of the Malachim, Olam HaMalachim, which is not a chumrius, but it's also not atzilus, chas v'shalom. It's refined, it's removed from this worldliness, but nevertheless, it's still a finite, manageable, graspable thing. Olam HaYetzira is going to be the world of the Galgalim, the world of the celestial influences, etc., and its kufos, and Olam HaShafel is going to be this world. And so this is where all of the shifts and the turns are taking place. Meaning, obviously, these three worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya come from the world of Atzilus. The world of Bria comes from the Bina of Atzilus. The world of Yitzira comes from the Zer Anpin in the world of Atzilus. And the world of Asiya comes from the Malchus of Atzilus. Obviously, they all come from the place that they come to, meaning they're unified in their source. Nevertheless, in the place of Atzilus, it's all unified. All of the differentiation there, the secret fact that there is a differentiation of a Shem Havaya and 5 differentiated partsufim in the world of Atzilus is almost an impossibility. That's the impossible secret of faith, of how unity and multiplicity meet. The world of Atzilus is the big secret that Yavan can't understand. Why? Because the world of Atzilus is a total stira. It's a complete and utter paradox of terms, because it's what the Zohar HaKadosh refers to as Ihu v'garmayu v'chiyuhu chad b'hon, meaning to say that in the world of Atzilus, the lights in the vessels are unified to such a degree that the vessels, which by definition are concealing blockages, in the world of Atzilus, they don't block, but rather they reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu even more. And this was the whole gilui of the Balatanya, ultimately. And when the Balatanya tried to explain how this works, he said it's Razid de Mehemnusa, it's the secret of faith. Olam ha'atzilus, the simple work that we do in Torah and mitzvos and elevating things back up to Olam ha'atzilus and being aware of that being the source of all differentiation that we see, is the yichud of what we're trying to do when we're miyached HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so how could it be that there's differentiation? There's these different partsufim, there's Bina, Zer Anpin, and Malchus in the world of Atzilus that eventually gives birth to actual difference, which is the world of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. And so the secret is that ultimately in their source, the difference, the emergence of difference is still in a state of unity. Chaver, are you with me on this? It's prior to the actualization of difference. Within the world of Atzilus, in the secret of radical unity, there is already contained the possibility of separation and differentiation that will eventually reveal itself in the worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. But in the world of Atzilus, there is no element of congealment, concealment, or pagam there. There's no negativity in the world of Atzilus. It's the pure potentiality towards expression. And Shviras HaKelim, and the shattering of the vessels is ultimately the process of that potentiation towards concealment that exists within the world of Atzilus by way of Razad Me'amusa, emerging outwards and congealing itself as the worlds of Bri, Yitzira, and Asiya, the worlds of separation, the gradations of separation, because our job is then to engage with the gradations of separation to show how ultimately they're all rooted all the way back in the potential towards limitation that exists in a refined way in the world of Atzilus. Yeah? That's the secret of faith. And so, yes, there's difference, but in the world of Atzilus, they're all miyuchad. B'shorash hakol sham kulo echad. And because b'shorash hakol sham kulo echad, in spite of all of the differences that abide between each and everything, nevertheless, there's an akuda panemius within each thing, which reveals how each and everything is ultimately the same as every other thing. Because everything is rooted in a fundamental, ungraspable, impossible to grasp paradox of unity, therefore the entire world can function as a galgal hachozer, and everything can transform itself and reverse itself to one thing and the other. Seen without the attachment to the radical secret of Razda Me'emnusa that Yavan cannot grasp because it's the secret of the paradox, all of the differentiation betrays and it speaks of separation, concealment, and dissolution, meaning of scatteredness, of just scattering sparks and tiny little lights that go out immediately that add no light whatsoever because there's nothing lasting in them. It's only within the holding on to the radical, impossible root of unity that gives birth to difference, which reveals the secret that difference in potential exists within the realm of unity as well, in the secret of the shalheves hakashura begacheles, of the flame and the conflagration that's contained within the coal itself. Without that, then it's just scatteredness. So Rabbeinu's saying, yes, the world is insane. Yes, it's a spinning top. Yes, there's no rhyme or reason to anything. Yes, everything shifts from one moment to the next. But nevertheless, that bespeaks the deep unity from which all things are coming, because everything is transferable with each and everything, because in truth, they're ultimately the same. At this point, it seems that this thing is standing at the tippy-top level in the aspect of the head of something, and the other thing is standing on the level of the lower leg of the situation. And then there's this topsy-turvy somersault of a process where the bottom is the top and the top is the bottom. ונכנסו בחומר גמור עד שהוא בעלי טייבוס, וכן כמה פעמים שבאו מלאכים בעולם הזה ונסלבשו בחומר כמבואר בכמה מקומות, וכן ההפך שמצינו שנעשה אדם מלאך. How could it be? A malach could be a person could be a malach. We see an interchangeability, we see in porous boundaries that exist between the boundaries that we've been convinced are so fundamentally unporous. The human mind, the rational mind, seeks to develop categories of thinking that can be neatly laid upon one another with rules and regulations of separating each thing from what it is and ensuring that this concept of thought remains what it is because I'm identifying what it is not. I'm able to differentiate between postulate A and postulate B, and therefore I'm able to ensure the particularized identity of A and B. But that's all built on the Hagdaras HaDevarim of the Seichel HaEnoshi, which thinks that it knows what's what. But ultimately, the Yiddish mind understands that the fact that things are what they are in this moment is not rooted in the fact that things are actually what they are in this moment, but it's the Ratzon HaElyon that's being mislabesh in this moment, and this particular permutation of the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that gives shape to existence and the way that it functions now, and that's why things are taking place. But it could change in any second, the moment HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides that it can change. This is the secret of Mi Sha'amar L'Shemen V'Yadlik, Yomer L'Chometz V'Yadlik. He who said that oil should be lit and illuminated, so too he can say that vinegar should be illuminated, because the difference between oil and vinegar is not a fundamental reality. It's simply the permutations and the order in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the worlds of Bri, Yitzira, and Asiya to function at that point. That's why everything is interchangeable. And the world is a spinning top that we refer to as a dreidel that is perpetually returning upon itself. Again, there are systems of philosophical thought that take this notion of eternal reoccurrence and they use it as the most damning way of thinking about reality. They see what Rabbeinu is describing here as the most bleak outlook on how a human being can perceive of reality, because it gives birth to the absurdity and the chaos of it all, and the fact that nothing is anything and everything can be anything, and why even try? But Rabbeinu is taking that condition. He's taking the question of the Sefer Chakira. He's saying, let's call it what it is. Let's say this is what we see, the Galgal HaChozer. But why do we see it as such? Why is everything so chaotic? Everything is chaotic because ultimately everything is interchangeable. And everything is interchangeable because it's ultimately rooted in a fundamental singular expression of unity, which calms us down when we find ourselves in the chaos. Because now the chaos becomes the Heichal HaGavanim HaMishtanim. It becomes the spinning colors. It becomes the Lahat HaCher HaMesapeches that is refined into the illumination of the Chashmal. This is the svara that we've been seeing in every Torah of Rabbeinu, the secret of Erchen, the fact that the Malchus of the higher level becomes the Keser of the lower level, that the Netzach Hod and Yesod, the legs of the lower level, are mislabesh in the head of the lower, the legs of the higher level become the head of the lower level. This is exactly what Rabbeinu was describing here, except in terms of the philosophers, of absurdity in particular. Here Rabbeinu is hinting to what he's saying. His whole svara here is ultimately just rooted in a fundamental understanding of what's happening in the writings of the Arizal, in Olam HaAtzilus, and the interpenetration of the worlds. And this is why on Chanukah specifically with play with Dreidel, as Rebbe Nachman writes that on Chanukah there's a big inyan to be engaged in Yonei Schok, because the true schok is v'nahapoichu, the fact that everything is absurd and I don't know anything, and we laugh when we come to terms with the recognition that what I thought was one thing is not some other thing, and therefore we have to awaken ourselves to the laughter of the Sipuri Maisios, of that cackling, that the misplaced son and the misplaced prince, the prince who was a pauper and the pauper was a prince, which represents the ever-shifting nature of the Hechale Hatmuros, and how one thing can become the other and another something else, and he hears this laughing, and it's a laughing that shakes the earth. And he says to his forest guide, what's that laughing? And he says, that's just the chucha, that's just the laugh of the day meeting the night and the night meeting the day. That secret laugh that emerges specifically when opposites are revealed to in truth be part and parcel of a singular whole. That's the schoik of why we play with Dreidel. And we're mamshech shefa elyon, we're mamshech hisufin de kedusha. Ki Chanukah b'chinas Chanukas Beis Hamikdash. Because Chanukah is the element of the founding instantiation and opening up of the Beis Hamikdash. And the Iker Binyan Beis Hamikdash is the Bechina of the Galgal HaChozer. The Beis Hamikdash is Das. Das is Das HaMispashet. Das is the Evan HaShasi. It's the Makom of the Tzimtzum. The entire notion of Mibein Shnei Akruvim, the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could be mitzamsim himself down, 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 to the place that he's mitzamsim himself, to the Evan HaShasiyah, to the Shirish of the Tzimtzum itself, to the Shirish of all of the Shinuyim, and all of the period, and all of the concealment. That's the secret of Beis Hamikdash, where the Elyonim and the Tachtonim are kissing, where they're unifying themselves together in the secret of paradox, of Makom Ha'aron Eino Min Amida. This is the crowning jewel of Yiddishkeit, and it's the thorn in the eye of Yavan. How could it be that something is without measure and with measure? Emunah. Reshad Lois Yada, that's how. The Beis Hamikdash is the Bechina of the Elyonim Lamata v'Tachtonim Lamala. This is the secret of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, where they're dancing. This is the secret of Purim. This is the secret of V'nahapechu, of why when Yitzchak Avinu left Gan Eden after the Akedah, and he saw Rivka coming on the camel, and she fell off the camel, Zakta Balei Tosfos, she fell off because she saw a ridiculous sight. Yitzchak walked out of Gan Eden walking on his hands, in the position of a handstand. Because it was V'nahapochu, it was a topsy-turvy world. He was dead and alive at once. It was Kate's Chai, it was Choshech and Or at once. The only way to grapple with absurdity is to laugh at it with more absurdity and to make Gans Purim out of it. It's the point of the connection between Lamalta and Lamala. Mishkan, like we said in the Mishkan, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'soichem. The secret, the paradox of all paradoxes, the Galgal HaChozer of it all, the secret of Tzimtzum, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be Shoyer His Shechina within each and every person, Kavyachol. Shashem Yishbarach Hishra Shechinaso Lamata B'Mishkan B'Beis HaMikdash Shezeh B'chinas El Yolim Lamata. The fact that God is found down here in Tzimtzum is literally the secret of El Yonim Lamata. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is down here. V'tachtonim l'mala, and that which is down here has the ability of going all the way up. V'zeh b'chinas tachtonim l'mala shezeh b'chinas dreidel, the spinning nature of it all, the dizzying nature of it all. B'chinas galgel hachozer, the spinning wheel that returns upon itself. Shakol chozer v'neshapich, that everything is returning back to itself and transforming itself and reversing itself, revealing that the end and the beginning are embedded, and that what we thought was the effect from the cause was in truth the cause for the effect, etc., etc. These are lashonas that one finds expressed in all of the Sifrei Mekubalim, especially the Ramchal and the Leshem, teaching us about this negative inversion, where we thought that the cause led to the effect. But in truth, it was the effect that was the cause that set out the entire original cause that gives birth to the eventual effect, and the secret of Seif Masib Machshavat Chila. And it's that dizzying place of losing one's mind and realizing that Muna Kol Zos. Chaver, you have a little bit more time? Say there. Kialpi Chakira. Hudavar rachot ma'od she'Hashem yisparach shu meroimim u'menusam l'mala mikol ruchni yasu mitzumsum shchinaso beklei hamishkan heim hashamayim v'shmei hashamayim lo yichal kolecha. Again, the biggest stira to Sifrei Chakira is the secret of Tzimtzum, which is the secret of Hanukkah. The secret of Hanukkah is an empty vessel that then gets filled with oil, which reveals the Rishimu of the Orient Sof that was there from the beginning. And then there's that singular rod that gets placed with a wick, which is the secret of the kav coming back down. And we light that wick and we illuminate the void with light. That's why we do it lamata me'asar tvachim, mirshas harabim, in the place of ragle de tarmadoi, in the place of concealment upon concealment on the left side of all things. Because what we're illuminating is the darkness. It's the darkness itself which becomes the crowning jewel of Nishmas Yisrael in the time of Hanukkah. It's the illumination of the darkness itself. It's our capacity to say, Yoshev b'seisar elyon, Yoshev b'seisar el Yavan. It's impossible al pi chakira to understand what it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mitzamsim himself, and that the infinite light should descend down here. Va'af al pi kain, but nevertheless, here Hashem Yisparach Shu Dafka Lehepach Midaisam Ki Be'emes Hashem Yisparach Yishra Shchinas B'Mishkan. But in truth, it's the opposite. That Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu Lios Ladir Betachtonim. That the king wants to build his palace on a dunghill. V'chein Lehepach Udavar Rachel Kapi Chakira Sha'adam Hu Bir Yashvela Yeh Lekoyach Lasis Reisham Lamala. Theoretically, it's impossible to conceive of any meaningfulness at the heart of human experience because the human being is such a flawed thing. But when we reorient ourselves to come to terms with the fact that the flaw is part of the feature and the design because it's a mark of imperfection, so then we come to own our imperfection, we come to Kalim Ru'uyim to allow HaKadosh Baruch Hu to illuminate his perfect light through our perfectly imperfect vessels. We reveal Elyonim Lamata V'Tachtonim Lamala. We uncover our koach. Sha'adam Hu Bir Yashvela Yelakoach Lasas Rosham Lamala. But that such a petty object, a creaturely thing, can be used to awaken the deepest ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol. And furthermore, once we're at it, how can we even speak of the notion of a will by the Infinite One? The truth of the matter is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed the opposite of their das. HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed the opposite. In truth of the matter, it's the opposite. Adar Abba Ipcha Mistabra. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself. Achenata Kel Mistater. Yes, I'm a concealed God, but I reveal myself fundamentally. Be'emes Yir Hashem Yisparach lehepech midaisam. Be'emes Hashem Yisparach hishra shchinasa lamata b'mishkan b'beis hamikdash. U'behema alsa l'reich nichoyach. V'zeh b'chinas al-yoyim l'mamata v'tachtonim l'mala b'chinas galgel ha'choyzer b'chinas dreidel. This Torah is mamish, and Rav Tzadok takes this teaching even further, where he says, "Be'emes, it's an olam hafuch, v'gam lo hafuch b'vasachas." It's upside down and right side up at the very same time. And now Rabbeinu goes even weiter. And again, whichever chaver can stick with me on this, then it's great. I'm sorry it's going a little bit longer. Hine koyach hiyuli. Rabbeinu brings us back to this first principle. How could it be that all matter, doimim, sameach, chaim, medaber, all of the various integrated levels of organisms and processing and development and the systems and vegetation and the animal kingdom and the classifications of different species and concepts over and over and over, how could it possibly be that the depth of proliferation and multiplicity that this world represents can actually come from a singular place? And the answer is hinted to already in the Ramban's utilization of a particular Greek notion, which was the notion of Heilig matter. Heilig matter was the notion, from a Neoplatonic perspective, of the origination of matter from an in-between non-matter and matter. It was like a mimutza, something that had the qualities of the emergence into the possibility of being and existence, yet nevertheless was still prior to the state of actualization. It represented pure possibility, although seen as a heilig matter, it has more of a physicality to it. But the Ramban, in his introduction to the Chumash and the Tzaddikim, Rabbeinu Azriel Megaron, especially the Chesed Avram of Slanim, who, like we said before, is a Gilgul of the Shpaler Zeda, so it's always good to bring that Torah, or it's a Giloy of the Shpaler Zeda. But they utilize the notion of the Huli, of this original form which is unformed, but it has the possibility of expressing itself in all possible forms, as a good way of understanding the nature of Keser. Keser, which is the highest Sphira, prior to any actualization, it's the Kutza Shel Yud, the very point even prior to the actualization of the Yud, and at that point, anything can emerge. And it's only after it expresses itself in a particularized way that its true definition will be seen, but prior to its actual definition, it had infinite possibility to it. And that's the secret of the Hiyuli. And the Atar Svi of Zidichov, in his Sefer Sur Me'Ravi Asetov, which is a fundamental introduction to Eitz Chaim Kadisha, especially with the commentary of the Bnei Yissaschar, he says that how could it be that the Ramban wants us and all of the Mikubalim who follow the Ramban to utilize a Greek concept to describe this lofty place? So the Atarat Tzvi says that in truth, Hiyuli, heilig matter, which is just a translated term, is Roshei Tevos, Hashem Yimloch Li'olam Va'ed. Hashem Yimloch Li'olam Va'ed. It's the secret that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingship will be revealed through all various expressions. And this heilig matter, prior to actualization, is the secret of the singular force that rests at the heart of all differentiation. B'sifreihem hu b'bechinas hamemutza ben hakoyach v'hapoel. In the books of science and the philosophy of science, the Heilig realm represents the in-between space between potential and actualization, meaning to say the beginning of the actualization of potential prior to actual actualization. Ki kol davar hu betchila b'koach, because in truth, everything prior to its actualization exists in a state of potential, because nothing is emergent yesh me'ayin, only by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'achar kach yotzim mikoyach halapoyel. And only afterwards, once it's expressed itself in its potential form, it then emerges into actualization. But when it emerges from the state of pure potential prior to actualizing itself, there's a moment of revelation, there's a heilig state of something, it operates in between something and nothingness. It is the point at which nothing begins to express itself as something. It's the in-between space. Again, like the Pesach Habayis, in between inside and outside, a place that is not outside, not inside, but both and at the same time. Shu shoresh kol hanivraim. And this is the root of all of the Nivraim. All eventual differentiation in the world of separation comes from this singular unity, which can be referred to ultimately as the Malchus of Olam HaAtzilus. Everything comes from Malchus to Atzilus. Everything comes down from the world of Atzilus. And all the way up. Everything is emergent from a singular source. Everything originally was contained within this heilig potential that contained all possibility. And all of the differentiated expressions of existence that unfold in accordance with the worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, or as we said, the Olam HaMelachim, the Olam HaGilgalim, and the Olam HaShafel, Shehim Nivdalim, Galgalim, and Shvalim, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, Kulam Chayzrim Chalila, everything returns back to its original source in Malchus Atzilus, and then it returns back as a refined expression to express itself in a new way. The Chayzav Nesapech min Nivdal l'Shafel mishafel l'Nivdal, and that which was refined on the level of Nivdal then goes up to be a level of Shafel because it's the Malchus of the higher level, and that Shafel, the Malchus of the higher level, now becomes the Nivdal. V'chein kulam ki b'shoresh kulam echad. V'zeh b'chinas ha'oisiyos ha'chalkukos ala Dreidel. And this is all hinted to in the fact of playing the Dreidel on Hanukkah, specifically on Hanukkah. Why? Because written on the Dreidel of Hanukkah are the osios of Hey, Nun, Gimel, Shin. Hey, Nun, Gimel, Shin. Goshna, the secret of Simcha. And the Bnei Yissaschar, obviously, everyone who hasn't should see the teaching of the Bnei Yissaschar on the secret of the Dreidel and the Hiskalis of the light of Mashiach. But for Rabbeinu, these osios of the Dreidel are Rosh Tevos, Huli, Nivdal, Galgel, V'Shafel. The secret of the unity of the world of Atzilus, which we're referring to here as Hilek matter, which is the undifferentiated source of all changes, and the realm of Nivdal, Galgel, and Shafel, which is the realm of changes. There's a unification between all of them, and that's what the Galgel HaChozer means. That's why when we spin the dreidel, we're acknowledging the fact that, yes, everything is ever-changing, but nevertheless, we are devoting ourselves and being most nefesh on the radical unity that rests at the heart of all these changes. Shem klal kol habriya keniska le'el. This represents the entirety of the cosmos and all of existence. Shakulam chayzrim chalilu misgalgilim mishapchim zemizeh, that they all return upon themselves back and forth, and they shift from one thing to another. This is revealed on Hanukkah specifically because Hanukkah is the inyan of the Hiskalis of the Beis Hamikdash, which for us feels as big as a paradox as God revealing himself in this world is the possibility of us actually being able to experience Geula. And that's what each and every person has to live with on Hanukkah also, with the radical steer of being the Yid who's still expecting and desiring and demanding Mashiach, in spite of the fact that we know how undeserving we are. And it's specifically within that paradox of the Bittul and the Yeshus at the same time, the Ani and the Ayin, that will be able to be Zoicha to the Hamshacha of the Beis Hamikdash. Shashamu b'chinas elyonim lamata v'tachtonim lamala. In the Beis Hamikdash, it's the secret of above is below and below is above. This is the secret of what the Tzaddik reveals, as we're going to see in Torah Zion, that the Tzaddik comes to be low, below, and above at the very same time. I'm happy. This is mamish what Torah Zion is saying, so this is like learning Torah Zion as well. This is the Bechina of the Dreidel, the Bechina of the Galgal HaChozer, that transforms itself back and forth. We're almost there, Chavra. V'zeh bechinas ha'geula. This is the secret of redemption. Redemption is v'nahapochu. Redemption is at the very bottom point of Kimat Yesh Rachmana Litzlan. A person comes to the Hiskalis and the Giloi Nifla of Ein Shem Yesh Bailam Klal. And they hear that Chruz HaGadol, that Rabbeinu Sha'ag B'Kol Gadol, and Aryeh Sha'ag Milo Yira. It's at that point of transformation. At the very bottom, a person comes to reveal that they have the capacity of uncovering the loftiest Nakuda imaginable. This is the element of Geula. That Shachal Afar Nafshinu, we're down by the dust, but it's specifically from the dust that it's going to be Hisnari Me Afar Kumi. Kizeu Ikra Geula Shahaisa Bechinas Hanal. This is the essential nature of Geula. Dahainu Bechinas Chayzeres Chalila. What we're davening for when we daven for Geula is a return back to this recognition, the dizzying awareness of the fact that things are what they are because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has decided that that's the way they are, but not because they're actually that way. And opening ourselves up to the radical shifts and change that can take place quicker than an instant. When we left Mitzrayim, Tekef Bashir Sayam. Immediately when we left Mitzrayim, which was the first instantiation of a nace, of the revelation, as the Ramban says, that we reveal the secret of the nace so that we can come from the nace to realize that Teva itself is a nace, and to realize that there's no difference between above and below. And the secret of splitting of the sea, immediately what we sang out with regards to was Tiviemo v'titaenu bahar nachlascha. We started talking about Beis HaMikdash, because when there was an awakening of the Elyonim Lamata B'Tachtonim Lamala and the V'Nahapochu Asher Yishlu to Ayehudim Hema B'Seineim. So it's a revelation of Beis Hamikdash, and it's the secret of the Shir Sheis Arla Asidish, is the Shir Pashat Kafel Meshulish Meruba. That also corresponds to the four sides, of the dreidel. Shabisrael binyan Beis Hamikdash. At that point of the topsy-turvy nature and the sky opening up and us realizing that below is above, above is below, and all we have is Amunah. That's the Iker Tachlis of Beis Hamikdash. And at that point, we said, okay, Beis Hamikdash it is. That's where the secret of Geula rests. Kizeh Iker HaGeula Shia Binyan Beis Hamikdash. The main expression of redemption is going to be the actualization of this in the world Mamish, and the secret of the Evan HaShasiyah. Shasham Hu B'chinas Galgel HaChozer. That's the place where it's perpetually transitioning from Tzimtzum to the fundamental Hiskalis of infinite light everywhere at every moment. Tzimtzum and the Hiskalis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light, infinite in every moment. That's the secret of the Galgal HaChozer at the Evan HaShasiyah. B'chinas Elyonim Lamata V'Tachtonim Lamala. Happening so quickly, so rapidly fast that it appears that nothing is moving whatsoever. Zehu Iker HaTachlis. This is the Tachlis. The Tachlis is Elyonim Lamata V'Tachtonim Lamala. The Sveikos of Reish Lois Yada. The unknowing of it all. The secret of the Amunah. the secret of the Emunah Kol Zos, of Tachlis HaYediyah Shaleneda. Ki be'emes kulo chad, everything is one. Ki ba'shoresh hakol echad, everything is unified in its shoresh. V'zeh gam kein b'chinas ha'osios, and this is also the secret of the letters of the Dreidel, Hey, Nun, Gimel, Shin, which we said already represent the source of Olam HaTzilus, Huli, and the Nivdal, and the Galgal, and the Shafel. It also represents Ka'alta Shevas Nachlas Cha Har Tzion. It reveals the secret of redemption, and that's what the Bnei Yissaschar hints to most explicitly. And the secret of Teviyem of Titaina Bahar Nachlascha, when we embrace the dizzying not knowing that rests at the heart of existence, and we break free the concealment of Yavan's desire to have us think that we can have any knowledge whatsoever, we experience a moment of the blazing light of Geula. And that's when we come to that place of Hanira Salalu Kodeshem Ve'en Lanu Rishus L'Shtamesh B'hem Ela L'Rosam Bilvad. We can't be Mishtamesh in them. I can't be Magsh in the Torah. I can't make God into an idol. I can't make redemption into something that I know exactly when it's going to arrive. Because the secret of Hanukkah is the waiting by the Pesach, waiting for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to arrive and bring Geula. Taviyemu v'titeinu b'har nachlascha b'chinas beis hamikdash shesham haya b'chinas galgal ha'chozer shezeh eker ha'geula. And this is the secret of each and every bias becoming a beis hamikdash by way of doing the avodas hamikdash by lighting the menorah in our house, revealing that we are the tachlis itself. The ayin b'maimer. Okay, Baruch Hashem, I didn't realize this. This was the Torah that I wanted to learn tonight, but I felt that it would have been too long. But it's Torah Tinyana Zayin, which is the Torah of Chanukah also, which is what we wanted to learn. Hanetmar b'Chanukah zeh matchil vayhibmi kates ki merachim yahan game, which is the secret of makif, pnimi, makif, this perpetual up and down shifting of levels that is rooted in a fundamental unity. Sham mivur gamkein me'inyan elyonim lamata, tachtonim lamala, me'inyan Chanukah, shu Chanukah space v'mekdash. Over there, Rabbeinu describes how the ikra avoid of the tzaddik is to be above and below at once, to reveal to the darimala that they're really darimata, and to the darimata that they're really darimala. All that means is it's the unity of above and below, aniyah v'ayin v'basachas. This is the bechina of the makifim that are described in that maimer over there, the unknowing of it all. The fact that every time I think I know something, I come to that place of knowing that I don't know anything, and it spins out of control once again. And the element of the makifim that are sovev, and they surround in a circular motion. Ayin sham v'havein. Look over there and understand. Chachma hu b'chinas Huli. So here we have an explicit reference. We said before the three lower worlds of the Galgalim, the Malachim, Galgalim, and the Shafel are Bria, Yetzir, and Asiyah. And we said the Huli is the Malchus of Olam Atzilus. So over here we see that the Huli is the element of Chachma, which is the world of Atzilus. So that's exactly what Rabbeinu is coming to be masbir, how the Yichud of the Olam Atzilus operates. V'nachzor le'inyan rishon. And let's return back to the first thing that we started with. Ki ein anu tzrichim lichan his klal b'chakiros. Because in the end of the day, we don't have to really enter into the chakiros. Ki iser gadol ma'od rak anu ma'aminim bo yisparach be'emunah levad. There's no knowledge. Rabbeinu's not saying they're dangerous. He's saying there's no possibility of knowing anything whatsoever. There's no wisdom in this world strong enough to cause a person to rationally believe in God. That's not how it works. It's an emunah. A person has to take a leap of faith. Emunah, derech emunah b'charti. Anu ma'aminim bo yisparach be'emunah levad. V'hu yisparach bara es koil ha'olam es kulam u'mekayim kulam v'asid l'chadesh es olamu. Now, just one last point on this. What Rabbeinu just did was reveal to us the secret of creation. He starts off with the isser of learning these things. And then he goes into the very teachings themselves and archives them in such a way that they become the receptacles strong enough to reveal the very depths of the secrets of the Raza D'Mehem Nusa and how we can properly orient ourselves to their questions. And then he returns back to that awareness of not learning them. But before, when Rabbeinu said, don't learn them, so that's a level of, okay, I'm not going to learn them because I'm going to follow. And then falling into the wisdom itself is realizing that there's all these details that seem to stand in opposition to God. And then taking all of those details and realizing that they all reveal God. Then when I come back to the Isser of learning them, it's a far different experience. Now I'm not learning them because I'm afraid or I'm not strong enough or I don't have permission or I'm not to be trusted. Adarabba, I just came to reveal that in the darkness there's light. But now I'm not learning them because I realize the tainug mufla that comes about by the sha'ashu and the oraisa that are rooted in emunah, that I don't have to waste my time with the nonsense of trying to rationally prove anything. There's more important things to learn, like inyani emunah, or shas, or halacha, or what it means to be a yid in this world. And with that, that's the victory of Hanukkah. That's the illumination of Hanukkah. It's the illumination of the wisdom of faith over and above wisdom of the intellect. which first and foremost has to embrace the nature of radical doubt and concealment and paradox and darkness and concealment and Torah Shabbal Peh and exile and all of those apparently oppositional elements that seem to block out the light, by way of understanding concealment as revelatory of something that is so lofty that it can never be revealed by way of rationality, we come to touch the secret of Emunah, and we come to drink literally from the liquid light and the shemen of Hanukkah Be'ezras Hashem.